Phil. I'm just outside of New Orleans, gearing up for a hearing that could change a man's life. John has been in prison for 26 years after being convicted of raping his then-girlfriend's 9-year-old daughter, Alyssa.
We're not talking about concrete, we're talking about titanium.
I called my mom in shock.
To me, Dr. Phil, that's a strong indication of innocence.
This is war all the way.
A Dr. Phil exclusive. I'm just outside of New Orleans, in front of the 24th Judicial Court in Jefferson Parish, Louisiana, gearing up for a hearing that could change a man's life. You may remember just a few months ago, we covered a story about John Kinsel. Now, John has been in prison for 26 years after being convicted of raping his then-girlfriend's 9-year-old daughter, Alyssa. Now, John is adamant that he didn't commit the crime, and Alyssa has since recanted her testimony, claiming she lied as a child just to get John out of her mother's life. Alyssa, her mother Adrian, and John's attorney Justin Bonus claim there's no evidence that John committed this crime. So why was he convicted and sentenced to life without parole? Now, before I step into the courtroom, take a look at a recap of John's story.
John entered our life after I was 5 years old. I never liked John. I wanted him out of our lives because he made our lives miserable. When we got to school, I told the counselor that John had touched me inappropriately. They called the police. John was put in jail and charged with sexual abuse.
Did this man touch you?
No.
Did he rape you?
No.
Did he in any way violate you sexually?
No, sir. I made a trip to Louisiana to recant on record in front of a court reporter. When I tried to do the right thing, the DA threatened to arrest me for perjury. I was petrified. I keep trying and I keep trying and I keep trying, and everywhere I turn, the door gets slammed in my face.
You wanted to recant your statement before trial.
Yes, I did.
What was the reaction of prosecutors?
He took me, it was 2 floors above everybody else. He put me in an empty grand jury room and he put an armed guard at the door. And that's where I stayed until I testified.
You're saying I'm a liar. I've lied under oath. I've lied in court. I've lied in written statements. And so the question that people have to focus on is, well, when are you lying? Are you lying then or are you lying now?
There was no evidence collected. The police, they totally took her word for it. I was in the courtroom when the verdict was read. And I put my head down on the row in front of me and just burst into tears because I knew that John was not guilty.
Was there any physical evidence?
No.
Because at one point the story was you were being raped daily at 7 or 8 years old, right? There would be physical evidence of that. Did you confront John about this?
I did not. I turned him in.
We'd have to do a 5-hour episode of Dr. Phil for me to tell you all the things that bothered me about this case. We haven't even touched on one of the most outrageous parts of this case, which is there were 2 trials that ended in mistrials, and then there was the 3rd trial where the jury came back with a 9-3 verdict. And the fact is, the judge sent them back in to come up with one more vote, because in Louisiana at that time you could be convicted by a 10-2 jury.
I do need help to get him free. He deserves to be out of those 4 walls. We are at a dead end. We have tried every legal way possible. We played by their justice system's rules and got smacked in the face every time.
Alyssa claims she tried everything to get the district attorney's office to right her wrong. Today, John's attorneys have been granted an evidentiary hearing. In just a few minutes, they will argue in front of Judge Donald Ferre. They say they have exculpatory evidence that will prove John's innocence. They invited me to be here because they want to shine a light on John's story. Now, no cameras are allowed in this courtroom, but when the hearing is over, I will let you know exactly what happened inside. Plus, I will sit down with John's team and we'll talk about his future. Well, I just left the courtroom, and I did not expect that we were going to have a ruling from the bench, but there were some big happenings in the courtroom today. Justin Bonus, who's the lead counsel on this, along with Marty Tankleff, who you may remember from 2007 when we were working on his case. Marty was in prison having given a false confession to bludgeoning his parents to death. He was exonerated. He later became an attorney. He's on faculty at Georgetown University and has devoted his life to helping others get exonerated. It's just been a stonewall with John Kinsel's case where the court has been unwilling to consider things that weren't heard by the trial court or the appellate court. Well, today there was a huge turnaround where the judge and the DA agreed to reopen the file and consider medical evidence, evidence that had not been presented before that we think put this case in a completely different light.
When you look at the claims that Alyssa makes in her testimony, the rape, I mean, you have no physical evidence of the rape. That's problematic, especially when that's the only piece of evidence that convicts John Kinsel. It's about the lack of physical evidence. And that's the scary thing, is that a person can be convicted of a crime that didn't happen.
Does this mean that John Kinsel is going to be set free? No, it doesn't. This is clearly a giant step in the right direction, and the first time in 26 years that there's really been a hugely positive development to hear all the evidence. Well, anxious to hear what y'all's take is from this morning in the courtroom.
I think that was an absolute victory.
What do you think, Marty?
I think today is a day that finally he's going to gain access to evidence, or at least there was a record made that, Justin will get access to evidence and we'll be able to give it to the experts.
Just overview-wise for the audience, how did we get in this situation? How did we get in this bad spot?
We filed John's motion on December 22nd of 2022. So we can put the medical evidence in front of the court. And on March 17th of 2023, the court essentially issued a denial of everything.
Why didn't they consider it?
That's a great question, and I can't answer that.
Okay, so look, this man's been in prison for 26 years, and I've said many times, depriving someone of their liberty in America comes at a very high standard, right? And it should be. It should be a very high standard before you take somebody out of the world and put them in a cage or take their life, even higher standard. And this man had his liberty taken from him without that standard having been met 26 years ago, right?
Right.
We all agree with that?
Absolutely.
I mean, it was taken then, and there was evidence that was available that didn't get into the record.
Right.
I've said, this is America, you're entitled to the best defense money can buy.
Right.
And he didn't have the money to get all the evidence into the record.
Pay for a doctor.
That's right. He couldn't afford to get this doctor back again.
Right.
So he didn't have that evidence into the record.
Correct.
So let's just slow down and think about that for a second. You're accused of a crime. You scrape up the money to get an expert to come in and evaluate medically whether or not there's evidence that the crime has even been committed, let alone that you did it. Guy shows up, they continue the hearing, guy has to go home. You can't afford the time, travel, and all that for him to come back a second time, so you go to trial without it.
Right.
So this man goes to trial without his expert, so he gets convicted absent evidence.
Exactly.
So here we are 26 years later, and you're having to fight to get evidence into the record so they can at least look at the facts. And that is...
It's mind-blowing.
It really is.
No. This is, the evidence submitted in this motion is telling the court what a doctor would have testified to 26 years ago.
Right.
And there's new evidence in there too, because as you know, Dr. Phil, the science, the medical science, it develops over time. We now know more and more and more.
Now, let me ask you this. What did you talk to the DA about, generally speaking, outside the presence of the court? You guys went off to a hallway or an attorney room. What did you guys talk about?
The fact that Everybody wants the record to be complete. Even the DA's office wants the record to be complete. They don't want to have to do duplicitous litigation where appeals are filed, essentially. It allowed me to streamline everything. The goal was to get what we wanted, which is this evidence.
A prosecutor's job is not to get a conviction. A prosecutor's job is to get justice. And I don't care if they've got 2 months, 2 years, 12 years, or whatever into a case. If along the way they discover, oh my God, this has been a miscarriage of justice, we don't have the right person, or a crime hasn't been committed, they are a fiduciary for the public. It is their duty to stand up and say, time out, we've gone down the wrong path. We need to stop this, drop these charges, and turn this man loose. Is that the kind of DA we're dealing with here? So when you went in chambers, she agrees that we should bring in the evidence that was not presented, and he came back out and gave quite a speech about being open and fair.
Yes, he did.
I'm glad he made those speeches, because he wrote some checks and he's going to have to cash. Prosecutors, they are a fiduciary for the public. It is their duty to stand up and say, time out, we've gone down the wrong path. We need to stop this, drop these charges, and turn this man loose. Is that the kind of DA we're dealing with here?
I hope so. I pray so. Prosecutors are quasi-judicial officers. They're not here to seek convictions. And you said that before. And I told Juliet Clark that I pray that she considers, when she gets the entire package that we're going to submit to her with all of the expert reports, that she considers really doing the right thing. Because it's John's innocent. And the right thing would be at least to give him a new trial, at the very least.
You know, Marty, you've seen this. If you give somebody, a prosecutor, an alibi, and it's got holes in it, they're on it like a duck on a June bug. I mean, they tear it to shreds, right? If there is evidence that is being used to prosecute and convict someone, and it's full of inconsistencies, a confession is full of inconsistencies, they should rip that up the same way they do any other timeline, any other evidence. And in this case with John, a lot of the evidence just doesn't hold together
At all.
There were things in the accounting here of this crime. I believe Alyssa when she's recanting, but put that aside. There are inconsistencies when this all happened, and there are medical inconsistencies here. If this young woman was raped for 2 years, there would be
severe injuries.
Yes, and there would be physiological changes that don't sort of present. It would be
They don't
clear.
go away.
That's right.
The physical evidence in this case absolutely eviscerates the state's case.
And so the prosecutor, faced with that, you can have medical opinions and then you can have medical facts. You're adding to the record medical fact.
Facts.
They should be all over that, should they not?
Absolutely. This should not be a case where they should think twice. You know, when Justin fully submits the additional medical evidence, the additional reports, we get the additional evidence into the record, we would hope the prosecutor's office would do the right thing.
Was she resistant to that at all?
Yes and no. I mean, an appellate prosecutor's sort of first instinct is to fight. I mean, that's what their instinct is. But I said, you know, that you need to consider this. Like I said, my prayer is that they really take an honest to God look at the hard facts that are going to be presented to them. The difference is, we're not talking about concrete, right? We're talking about titanium.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
solid like that.
Who was it that asked to go into chambers? And what was the reason you asked to go into chambers besides open court?
It's always my position that if you can work something out so that there are no, I don't like surprises. No one likes surprises. But I also think we came to a resolution, and the prosecutor and I, we came to an agreement that John should be able to get the evidence and get those expert reports in. That's going to get John to where he needs to be. And see, that's what I wanted.
What did John say to you today when you told him what happened?
He'll ride the tractor until he dies in a lane hunt. So that's what John does. He rides the tractor around.
And to me, Dr. Phil, with all the innocence men I've met over the years, that's a strong indication of innocence. You know, exonerees or innocent men and women are defined by their actions, not merely their words. John has been acting and speaking for 26 years. If that doesn't speak volumes, I'm not sure what does.
Yeah. So he's not saying, hey, I'll plead out,
No,
time served.
This is war. This is the Red Sea moment,
Yeah.
right? All the way.
So when you went in chambers, you said, we've been negotiating and have an agreement that she agrees that we should add all of this to the file, bring in the evidence that was not presented, so the record is complete, the court can see it all. And he came back out and gave quite a speech about being open and fair and equitable.
Yes, he did.
My hope is that he holds to his word. And when everything is before him, and really I hope it doesn't get before him, I'm hoping that the prosecutor's office sees the light and sees that justice can be reached by coming to a resolution that would be just for John, which would be his exoneration.
Well, I'm glad I was there, and I'm glad he made those speeches, because he wrote some checks that he's going to have to cash.
And we have some things coming. We're working. We're developing new facts. We're not stopping. So things are going to be coming out soon.
If there are 2 or 3 primary facts that you think are going to drive this man's freedom, what are they? Things that are going to come to light that haven't been in the record before. What's going to set this man free? These are things they have.
That they knew about before the trial.
And they didn't disclose.
Correct.
And you consider this smoking gun level exculpatory? If there are 2 or 3 primary facts that you think are going to drive this man's freedom, things that are going to come to light that haven't been in the record before, what's going to set this man free?
Well, obviously the medical
Right.
evidence is going to corroborate the recantation. Recantations are always viewed with skepticism, right? So there's a tremendous amount of case law out there about you're supposed to evaluate. The recantation is just evidence of the unreliability of the testimony, or the character of the witness. So what we are going to do is what the case law says, which is the court has to evaluate the trial testimony. We're going to show how the trial testimony is false, not just from Alyssa, but also from the doctor. The other evidence that I think is going to be maybe just as powerful, I can't really get into that. The developments are ongoing, and nothing is in the record with regard to this. And when I say new evidence, I mean this is within the last couple of days, new evidence. So I can't really disclose that yet because I haven't even put it on the table yet to everybody.
All right, these are things they have.
That they knew about before the trial.
Okay, and they didn't disclose.
Correct.
And you consider this smoking gun level exculpatory?
It's pretty darn close. This is absolutely favorable, and it's absolutely material, and it goes to the heart of the reliability of the claims.
Okay. And when was this discovered?
Recently, days from today.
That you've discovered it?
Yes.
But they knew it at the time?
The prosecutor's office, or at least the prosecutor that tried the case.
If this DA becomes aware of it, that's your hope that this may not get back to the judge, that the prosecutor may come in and move to vacate this conviction.
Correct.
I've been in the litigation arena a long time, and there are those that create a whole cottage industry renting themselves out to one side or the other.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that we sometimes fail to realize that there's a human life that's at stake at the core of this. You know, every one of us has a little bit of a role here, but John's the one that's been sitting in prison. And his family has been suffering right along with it. And I think that's something that needs to be rectified.
The compassion I have for John, it's almost equal to the compassion I have for Alyssa, because she's living with this, trying to make it right for the last, almost 2 decades now.
That speaks volumes. I mean, you see in these cases where somebody recants and or comes forward and says it didn't happen, and they just disappear. Very rarely, if ever, have I ever seen anybody do this for 26 years.
Yeah, and you alluded to it. You have to look at recantations as just kind of the reliability of the witness. And there's a lot of research out there that says they do it kind of out of guilt. They feel like, I didn't mean for all of this to happen. There's evidence that says there's a correlation between whether the parents believe them or not. If their parents believe them, they don't tend to recant. If they don't, they do tend to recant. But when you've got somebody that all these years later are still willing to recant, understanding that they can be looking at penalties of perjury and filing false police reports, that goes beyond just somebody thinking, maybe I should.
Alyssa was threatened with perjury in 2006.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, she maintained even after the threat of perjury. I do think though that recantations, there's a bleed over from a regular eyewitness recanting versus a victim.
Yeah.
When a victim recants, I just don't think the analysis should be the same as when a witness recants.
Let me ask you this, based on what happened today, what was a long shot uphill battle, is it fair to say that hope is better now than it was before? You're more hopeful about this than before?
I am more hopeful, but only the Lord knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, we know these are uphill battles. It's hard to unring a bell, and it's been 26 years, but we don't take these on because they're easy.
No.
But it's worth it.
It is.
Absolutely, it's worth it.
Every little step gets you closer to tipping that scale.
Right.
And it does happen.
Listen, I could never have fathomed, I said it to you earlier today, that in 2007, when I was in prison, watching the Dr. Phil show, that this many years later I would be sitting next to Dr. Phil in a courtroom working a wrongful conviction case. And to me, it just goes to show you that the fight can never stop. But the fight that we're doing is making a difference.
Yeah.
I think every year since then, we've probably had more exonerations than we ever did before, and I think we can't stop in this fight.
Yeah, and when we were working on your case all that time ago, and to see what you've done with that second chance and how you've paid it forward, it just gives you so much inspiration to do it.
I really appreciate that, because being able to look 5 people out of prison in the last 5 years, and I'm pretty confident John will be one of the future ones.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be doing this work if I didn't believe in it.
Yeah.
And I know I'm making a difference, and I know Max will make a difference, like Justin is making a difference, and you are. And we can't stop, because if we stop the system, and we as a society will end up suffering.
I know this is not the last one we'll be working on together, so my platform is y'all's, so
Thank you.
know
That's
I'm here for you.
Thank you.
And we'll keep a bright light on it.
All right.
Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Absolutely.
so much.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be right back.
You do realize that I showed up in that courthouse and demanded them to give me a reason why legally they couldn't hand me my own records.
Closed captioning provided by What's y'all's understanding of what was achieved, what happened this morning?
It's my understanding that they had their little powwow and came to a decision about the evidence that they've been blocking, and now they're all in agreement that Justin Bonus is going to get that evidence.
This was an evidentiary hearing, and just so everybody at home understands, it was about the evidence, and there is evidence that was never put in the record for a variety of reasons that now is going to be added to the record and is going to be considered, one, at the DA level, because the DA can drop these charges. They can make a recommendation to vacate the conviction.
Oh my God.
And end this before it ever even gets back to the judge. So it doesn't even have to go back to the court, or it can get to the judge, who can look at it and say, based on this, I can make a decision to vacate or send back for a new hearing. And that had been completely denied before a motion to put all this back in. It had been said, absolutely not. And now it was 180-degree turnaround and said, yes, we'll do it. So this is a huge step forward.
Has anybody said why?
I think that it's just a matter of just peck until you get, this judge has been on the bench for 26 months. It's a new judge. This is a DA that did not try the case, and it's just new eyes. It doesn't mean that he's going to be turned loose, but it at least needs to be heard.
The judge, when I read his record, he's worked both sides of the law. And I told the attorney, Justin, I said, I feel better about it. He's not just been part of the district attorney's office his whole career. So maybe this means that he'll be a little bit more lenient.
As I've said, the court, and certainly the prosecutor, their job is to get justice, not a conviction. I don't care if you've worked on a case for 10 years. If you get in the middle of it and discover something that says, you're barking up the wrong tree, you're after the wrong person here, it's their job to say, stop. We're wrong. We need to stop doing this.
That did not happen here.
No, it did not happen. But we know they make mistakes. I mean, there have been hundreds of exonerations of people on death row that were going to be killed.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And I work on them all the time. And it does happen. It does turn around. And today was a big positive step. I'm not trying to get false hope here. It means things that should have been considered at the original trial are going to now be considered.
Well, too, the fact that they're just listening.
Right.
They haven't listened, and now they're listening.
Right.
And he seems that he's got an ear. He will listen to what's going on.
Yeah, and he made quite a show of saying that, hey, I'm all about justice and openness and hearing, and he wanted that out there.
You do realize that I showed up in that courthouse and demanded them to give me a reason why legally they couldn't hand me my own records. I said, do you need a birth certificate, driver's license, social security card? You tell me what you need, but I want you to give me a statute, to read me the statute that states that you can't give me my own personal medical records. They said, go to Children's Hospital, and I said, I don't want what's from Children's Hospital. I want what's on the evidence receipt. And then when I found out it was only 3 things, I called my mom in shock. Like, they did this, and to this extent of time that he's punished for on 3 pieces of evidence, that's it? Like, I didn't know that before.
You got to do what you got to do.
I started questioning things, and they didn't like it.
Yeah, and they need to be questioned, and that's how we're going to get where we're going. Georgette, you've got an interesting position in all this because you witnessed the call between Alyssa and Aunt Stacy, right? And what did you hear?
I don't regret doing it because in my mind, I was saving my mother and I was protecting my baby brother. And that was my role.
You don't regret doing it?
The day that I testified, I called my mother's sister and I told her that it didn't happen. He never touched me. My aunt beat us to the courthouse. There was a screaming match going on in the middle of the hallway in front of the courtroom between the ADA on the case and my aunt and a crowd. It was just chaos. The ADA made sure that I was not allowed to speak to a soul until I testified. I told a white lie that I thought was going to get him out of our world, out of our lives. I didn't realize what was going to happen to him.
Georgette, you've got an interesting position in all this because you witnessed the call between Alyssa and Aunt Stacy, right? And what did you hear?
Alyssa called and said that she couldn't go through it, that she just wanted to tell the truth, and that, she knew that she made a mistake. When we got there, it was just like a tug of war. Stacy wants to see Alyssa, and The district attorney was like, no, that's it. We have her statement already on video, and that's all we need. And you're not going to have a conversation with her. And they just kept her away from us.
Well, you said you heard her say two things. One, I don't want to go through with this. And two, I want to tell the truth. And those are two very different things. I don't want to go through with it. They could just be scared and not wanting to go down there and around all these people. But the second part of that, I just want to tell the truth. That's a very different thing than I just don't want to go through with it. You not want to go through with it because you're scared and intimidated.
Right. Correct. Yeah, because I had already had a conversation with Alyssa. She had already told me that it wasn't the truth. But at this point, they were ready to go to trial that day.
When you went down there, the DA separated her from her aunt.
Us, from both of us.
From you and her aunt. So she wouldn't let you or Stacy around you.
I don't grabbed her and went running toward him to get hold of him before he disappeared on us. Told him, like, Alyssa can't testify. And he's like, oh, yes, she is. And I'm like, no, I don't mean because she can't. I mean, it didn't happen. She didn't think it would go this far. This needs to be stopped. And they whisked her away. And he's screaming at me, there's no way in hell I've been working on this case for 2 or 2.5 years. I'm not stopping a damn thing. And like we were screaming back and forth. Like he totally shattered everything I grew up believing in the justice system.
Where'd the DA take you?
It was at least 2 floors above the, I guess Judge Hand's office was on the 2nd floor.
I think they were on the 2nd floor.
And then at least 4th floor in an empty grand jury room. And this door was locked, and this door had a Jefferson Parish police officer with a gun on his hip that stood there until he was given the all clear to drag me back into the courtroom. And I'm in 7th, 8th grade, 13, 14 years old at that. Took me away from everybody, completely petrified me.
And you told the DA, I want to tell the truth, I don't want to say this. What did you tell the DA?
The DA and I never had a conversation after the incident in the hallway. What she said about he doesn't need me, he's going to put me on that stand whether I say it or not. He's got the video evidence, which is the children's advocacy video. That was a major part of today's win.
Right.
He didn't care what I had to say. So I got on the stand, and out of straight fear, because I know the things that are being threatened to my mom. I know what's being told to her by the DA's office. You know, she's panicking because Child Protection Services, you know, they're talking about putting her in jail and taking us away. And, you know, and this is just from the DA's office. This has got nothing to do with her not complying with their investigation. This was just threats if she didn't.
When was the last time that you communicated with John Kinsel?
It's been in the last couple of weeks.
Right, because he'll call sometimes, and I'll have him on speakerphone, and she'll talk, but she can't be on his call list or any visitation.
What do you say to him?
Our conversations are very short because I don't want to get him in any trouble because he's not supposed to have communications with me. And I haven't seen him in person since 2006, 2007. That's the last time that I saw him.
Do you feel a need to apologize to him?
I have apologized.
What did you say to him?
Well, it was that in 2006, you know, it was only a mouthing I'm sorry because he was in shackles and walking past me. I wasn't allowed to get close to him. And to me, a sign of respect is to apologize to somebody in their face in person.
Do you feel a need?
I do feel bad for what I did. I know that why I did it. I don't regret doing it because in my mind I was saving my mother and I was protecting my baby brother, and that was my role.
So you don't regret doing it?
It's not in that sense. Like, I feel bad because what I thought was a white lie to make him go away turned into this chaotic mess that we have all forever had to live with. If I wouldn't have done it, the reality of the situation would he would be dead. That's come out of his mouth.
That either he would be dead or he could have hurt or killed one of us.
Because of how bad it was.
And he knows it. He said it. I needed to be stopped. I could have hurt or killed the people I love the most.
So do you think that it's, in a sense, justifiable?